Your WNBF experience, first time at Worlds, you obviously won your pro card. I think that was after we spoke, which again, congratulations on that. And then you flew to Seattle, competed at Worlds. Talk to us. How was that? What was the placing specifically? Just the whole thing. Maybe somebody's listening who doesn't know and is curious too.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so we spoke before I had competed in Australia. That went fantastically well. So I had 3 shows in a row, September 30th, October 7th, October 14th, New Zealand, States. Came back home 2 weeks later, went to Brisbane, which is a short flight from New Zealand. Won there, and then I had 3 weeks until Worlds. So the game plan for us was to try to get a little bit tighter, but then also have the benefit of eating up. I was in, very good condition, obviously, but trying to get on the kind of level where I can be as competitive as possible at Pro Worlds and really represent myself well as a pro in the middleweight division, which is historically has been the most competitive division. We're right up there with it, and it didn't disappoint this year, but all 3 divisions were super competitive this year, which I'll talk about in a second. So Berto and I decided the best play was to take basically half of those 3 weeks and run low days, and then jump into what we thought was roughly my maintenance calorie, slightly conservative, and kind of eat up into the show, and then run a very abbreviated load because I wouldn't need to fill out as much because I wouldn't be as flat, right? And that really proved pretty effective, and I looked the best I ever have on game day at Worlds, which what more can you ask for, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, as we speak, I've had a decent amount of time to reflect on it, but probably not enough. I competed on Sunday, November 19th, and it is the very last day of November now, so I'm still inside of 2 weeks post-show. So WNBF Worlds, I have been there before, but always as a coach. So I think the first time I coached physically present at WNBF Worlds was 2014, and I've been there multiple times since, but this is, like I said, the first time I ever had the privilege and honor of being at a level where I could compete at it. This is also the first time it's been a 2-day show. The WNBF has been doing a really good job of growing internationally, and it's arguably the biggest global federation now. I think they have 52 international affiliates, and some of these affiliates are gigantic and put on shows that are huge. So for example, WNBF Taiwan had 2 shows this last year where they had nearly 400 competitors.
Oh, wow.
WNBF Canada crushing it. WNBF in Europe, there's some shows that are in the 200s as well. So it really is becoming quite the global international federation, and it's one of the only world championships where there's more international competitors where there are domestic, so it's a true Worlds, if you will.
Do you have like a specific contract with the WNBF now that you turned pro? How does that work exactly? Because I was listening to the Iron Culture podcast. Shout out to your podcast with Omar Isu. That's a great one. And you were talking about the recent, of course, Worlds experience. Also, for those that haven't checked out Team 3DMJ on YouTube, you put up footage from your contest as well for WNBF World. So definitely go check that out. But to circle back to my question here, it was, dang, did I lose my question? This is what happens when
Was there a specific contract?
Right, there it is. Yes. So is there a specific contract once you turn pro that you have to honor to a certain degree as far as promoting the WNBF, etc.?
No, not for promoting it. You agree to a code of ethics, and you do sign certain things when you compete and you get your pro card, but it's quite similar to when you sign as an amateur and you compete. The only things that you do need to be mindful of as a pro are that you are specifically needing to compete in a given time frame for your pro card to stay valid. So when you get your pro card for the first time in the WNBF, you have to compete within 1 calendar year of you getting it to kind of activate and maintain pro status. So getting it in within 3 weeks, a good bonus, right? And then from that point on, it switches to 2 years. So you have time to have an off season, and you compete every other year. And it's also pretty well known that if you have extenuating life circumstances or something going on, you can, reach out to the WNBF, and they will generally make exceptions to that. You guys have probably seen many pros take longer off seasons and come back later, and it doesn't seem to be like they have to requalify. Sometimes they do. So it's a bit subjective. It depends upon what those life circumstances are. And that's something, just to be transparent about it, I think that rule should change. I don't think that it's necessary or conducive to, I don't think people are like, I want to get my WNBF pro card and retire. And I don't think people are going, I forgot to compete. I need this rule to keep me in here. There's not really a clear benefit to it for me. I think it's more kind of, we want to make sure people stay. Like they're going to stay, like keep running shows. People do this for intrinsic reasons. And I also think that anytime you introduce subjectivity into a sport, it can be perceived, even if it's not, not as something favoritism or political. Like, why did they get to get extenuating circumstances, but I didn't? And because it's a subjective call. Like, why is my life circumstance more important than them? So I think it'd be really clear and good just to either do away with it, like you get your card and you can, as long as you pay your fees, you're a pro and you just compete when you want, or to make it very, very clear what, and like have it be like a jot form submission of, I would like to extend. So I think as the sport grows and as it becomes larger and larger, it needs to be a little less mom and pop and a little more structured and organized. And that's something I'm going to talk to the WNBF heads about, and they're, people with their hearts in the right place doing good work. So hopefully I think that can happen, especially the initial rule where you have to compete within a year. I think that can be, depending upon when in the year you get your pro card, where you're physically located, and when there's a pro show, that can run physiological hell on somebody. You get it in April and the next pro show is in July and you're peeled. Whew, that can be rough. But one cool thing about Worlds this year, Kenny, is the first time it was a 2-day show because it's getting so big. So day 1 was amateurs, day 2 was pros, and you have to qualify to compete as an amateur. And there are different rules depending upon your regional federation. So in some countries, they have qualifiers and then you have to do well at nationals, or sometimes you have to like win a class at a national show. So sometimes it can be very, very competitive and you only get the best amateurs from a given country, or others in the States where there's a lot of competitors and a lot of shows, you get like the upper echelon of amateurs, but not necessarily like the national champion class winners. You have to place 3rd in a class of 5 or higher in a show, or you have to win a class of 4 or 3 to be able to compete in that division at Worlds in the States. And if it's a class of 2 or smaller, it's not a Worlds qualifier. So you're essentially looking at like the upper quartile of competitive amateurs on day 1. Even with that, restricting it to just like the good amateurs and then just the pros, it's a small pool of, there was nearly 300 competitors in the show. So it was ridiculous physiques everywhere, right? And it's also November 19th. So people are in shape. They've been dieting a long time, November 18th and 19th. Many of the amateurs are pro quality competitors. And on day 1, it's a super pro qualifier. So if there's 8 or more in your class for the bigger divisions like bodybuilding, figure, men's physique, and bikini, then you get a pro card. Or if there's 5 or more in the other divisions, which are a little less populated, and then you can compete the next day. And then of course, if your class does not have 8 or 5 or more, which was rare, if you went into the overall against the other winners and you beat one of the people who got a pro card in the order of the overall, or if you win the overall, you get a pro card. So there were, for example, in men's bodybuilding, 3 people who got pro cards on day 1, and 2 of them then competed in the pros the next day. So when we got the athletes meeting done on Friday, us pros, we were looking at, who's on our roster. We're like, and there's going to be some more people. So there were just some huge classes, man.
What's really impressive is your Team 3D MJ athlete, shout out to Dirk, who competed last year, if I'm not mistaken, won the amateurs.
2 years ago.
Oh, was that 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow, that flew by. Okay, so then I was going to say it's really impressive that he came back the next year, because that's not very common unless you're like a veteran in the sport who's competing every year because they're staying so much closer to stage weight. But for someone as young as Dirk, that would have been impressive. But nonetheless, it's still very impressive that he won the lightweight title. And yeah, he had a relatively shorter offseason, but he already had the development nonetheless. That's an impressive thing. Was that Berto's client?
Yeah, Berto's his primary coach. And one thing that is really impressive about Dirk is that when he won his pro card at Worlds, he won not only the bantamweights, then he went on to win the overall. And that was actually the first time in amateur Worlds that an overall has ever won the bodybuilding title. So that was a historic moment. Dirk crushed it, and he won in his pro debut the lightweight title. He also won the WNBF Valhalla lightweight class over in Germany, and he placed 2nd in 2 very big other natural shows, I think, or at least one, the INBF show. I can't remember exactly his season, but he had an incredible rookie season. And also shout out to Octavio. He won the lightweight amateurs, got his pro card, and then competed in the lightweights and the pros the next day. So that was pretty cool. He's also one of Berto's clients.
Okay, that's impressive. That's the middle. He was competing in the middleweights?
Lightweight.
Oh, lightweight. Okay. So before we circle back to you for a second, do you think that there's a possibility that a bantamweight or even a lightweight, actually lightweight has been done, shout out to Brian Whitaker, but a bantamweight, because there has been a bantamweight pro class in WNBF Worlds, if I'm not mistaken.
Occasionally there has
It's occasionally. Okay, I was going to say, but that a bantamweight can come and swoop the overall, because Clement Yearwood, I believe that was when there was a bantamweight, and Brett Freeman, but I don't remember the exact, 2018, and I believe it might have been 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right. Yeah, Brett won the bantam world title And I definitely think it's possible because lightweights have done it. And
Yeah.
I think the pros are a little different. Like the amateurs, they typically have the set cutoffs and they just stay there. But with the pros, they kind of decide in proximity to the competition based upon how many enter, whether they're going to follow the strict cutoffs or whether they're going to break it up into relatively even thirds. And there was enough this year they followed the strict cutoffs for the 3-weight classes. But I almost think in retrospect, they might have felt like, oh, we should have done a bantam because there was 16 lightweights.
Yeah, it's a lot. Was that the biggest class?
It was. It was the biggest pro class. There were 16 lightweights, 9 middles, and 10 heavies. So if they had had a bantam, I don't know. The thing is, it may have not been an even cutoff. It might have been like 5 bantams and then like 11 lights. So they might have decided, nah. Or it might have just been, look, we can't add another class because we were kind of got the thing locked in. But yeah, it was 165 and under for the lightweights, over 165 up to 185 for the middles where I was, and then over 185 for the heavies and the pros. And then in the amateurs, it's spread out a little more. So it's over 190 for the heavyweights for the amateurs. And then they have the bantams, lights, middles, and light heavies. And they had only, I think, 5 or 4 in the light heavies and the heavies. And then they had 8 to, I want to say 14, 15. And the lights, the bantams and the lightweights were very big. And the middles were pretty big. And then light heavies and heavies were moderate sized classes. So an amateur on Saturday. So they're big. To answer your question, it's certainly possible. I think it is just really depends upon, like, we haven't yet seen someone who has the right proportions and overall muscularity as a bantamweight to, I think, really threaten until now with Dirk. In my opinion, like he has kind of like that bubbliness. And I think his height, it does make him look like a little bit of an apple versus 2 oranges, but he's not far off. Like if you watch that overall with Brian DaCosta, Benjamin Schuster, and Dirk, it wasn't like it was a clear 1-2 versus the tiny bantam. It was like Brian DaCosta is bigger, but he's not out muscling anybody. He's a little bit less lean, but he's overall more complete. Like I agreed with the decision, but a Dirk who's able to put on a few more pounds of muscle and refine his physique and improve his posing a little bit, and then maybe a slightly less competitive overall. Like it's not always going to be a Brian and Ben Schuster. I mean, it's probably not going to get less competitive, but this was the most competitive overall I've ever seen at Worlds, in my opinion. It was ridiculous. There are definitely years where Dirk could have won that overall, and he would have been technically a bantam, even though he competed in the lightweight class at his body weight. That's very impressive.
Yeah, it just depends on who shows up at that specific time, because like you just
100%.
mentioned, it's funny because Paul Ravella, who I just spoke with literally a few days ago, we were talking about WNBF World as well, but it's kind of like it was like 3DMJ versus Pro Physique. Who coached the middleweight guy?
The middleweight is coached by a guy named Daniel. He's a coach from Germany and also a very, very good competitor. The competitors in Germany are crazy right now. Yeah, I'm forgetting his last name. I'll look it up as I talk. But yeah, so you had Brian DaCosta, who was coached by my good friend Paul Revelia.
Yeah.
Great guy. And just to give him a little bit of shit, I think his only non-bikini competitor or non-men's physique competitor. So I don't even know if he knew what he was doing with that guy. But but in all seriousness, I have known Paul since like the forum days. We're talking 2007, probably the first time we interacted on the forums. I remember him getting his NGA Pro card. I remember back when he used to compete in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
But Daniel Kubik, he's a guy who coached Benjamin Schuster, and he is also a natural bodybuilding like world champion and one of the best bodybuilders in Germany. So yeah, between him and Fabian Farid and Dirk Emmerich and Benjamin Schuster, it's like, what the hell is going on in Germany? And there's others too. That's a short list. But yeah, anyway, we had Dirk, who is coached by 3DMJ, primarily Berto, doing a fantastic job. Benjamin Schuster working with Daniel Kubik, and then we had Brian DaCosta working with Paul Revelia, all seasoned athletes. Yeah.
Yes. Did you feel like you held your own?
I did feel like that. So
nice.
And that was, so I got some good comparisons. I got some good looks, and I was expecting to be in like the bottom quarter of the pros, and I was, but I wasn't at the bottom of the bottom quarter. So the way it works at Worlds to keep it streamlined so you don't end at like 2 a.m. is the top 5 get to know if they placed, and that's something that's passed on from the judges to the expediters, and it's not in any specific order, and then they get to do their posing routine and they go out for the awards. So I knew I was not top 5 along with 4 other gentlemen. And I found out once kind of the dust had settled, you can email the secretary, Tina, and she'll tell you that where you placed. And I placed 7th, and I was a little closer to 6th than I was 8th. So if you beat a couple pros in a lineup, you're in the mix. So for me, just to say, like, my pro debut 3 weeks after getting my pro card in the most competitive pro show in the world, in my opinion, to place 7th. And these are good pros, man. It was mind blowing to me. Everyone on that stage is either that year one of the top, if not the top amateur in their country, or someone who's already done a pro show and typically done relatively well. So just to give a recap of the middles, the winner was Benjamin Schuster, who is a 21-year-old phenom from Germany, who, like I said, he beat Dirk Emmerich in the overall, the WNBF Valhalla. So he won the heavies and the overall pro title there against Dirk Emmerich. He also won the Evo Classic as well as the INBF overalls, which are invitational pro shows that invite people from any pro natural organization. So a bunch of the top European pro competitors show up, and there was hundreds of competitors in the INBF show, and Benjamin Schuster came out on top, and he beat Fabian Farid twice this year, who was the middleweight winner from Worlds last year.
Yeah, that's
and some
crazy.
people thought he should have beat Bada. I was one of them who would have maybe had him edging out Bada personally. So he beat Fabian Farid multiple times. He beat Dirk Emmerich. He also got his pro card that same season. And for God's sake, the man's 21. And he also got his PNBA pro card. So to say that Benjamin Schuster had an epic rookie season is an understatement. And everyone is expecting it to be Bada versus Benjamin. That's like kind of the battle. Bada, Benjamin, and Dirk was the predictions if you looked on some of the discussions around natural bodybuilding. He did win, but he actually had a really tough fight with another bodybuilder from Europe, from Denmark, Frederick Ibsen, who was in some of these battles as well, where Benjamin was having his pro debut over in Europe. And Frederick is a natural champion himself, like I said, placing second, I think, in one show to Benjamin Schuster. And he is, in some shots, bigger and denser than Benjamin. You know, he's in his early 30s, and he was shredded, don't get me wrong, but they're shredded in this Benjamin Schuster and Dirk Emmett shredded. So when you're comparing how many glute striations people have and how high up they go, we're talking levels to this shit, right? But Frederick, I think, got some first place votes. It wasn't like a 1-point decision, and I did think Benjamin was the right call, but it was clear 1-2-man race in the middles, which was pretty cool to see. Or to be a part of. I didn't see it until afterwards. And then in third, you had Agostino Russo, who is a American by way of Italy. He's a pro who I met at the Washington show that was just on the 14th. And he's an excellent bodybuilder, great shape. He won the pro portion of that Pro-Am show. Jeff placed second. Would have been interesting to see if Jeff at his peak, he was in his best shape ever at Worlds on Sunday. So you had a pro champion, someone just coming off a pro win in third. Fourth place was the overall winner from Saturday. So the guy who won the middleweights, got his pro card, and then said, you know what, I'm just going to win the overall as well. And that was Douglas King from Cayman Islands. So if you win the overall title in the amateurs at Worlds, you're already a good pro because you're beating all the best amateurs in the worlds. And it's not uncommon for people who do that to then be immediately a threat in the pro ranks. And that's exactly what we saw. He placed fourth in this very tough lineup. And the only thing I think holding him back from cracking the top three was that his conditioning wasn't quite at the elite level. It was still good, don't get me wrong. And then in fifth was Malcolm Cooper, who won the IPE and the WNBF Universe. So Mr. Universe in fifth, that tells you something about how competitive that class was. I don't know the placings after that except for mine, but I think in sixth was Finbar Murphy from Ireland. And then it was me. And then there was someone from Italy, I think Ephraim Mativi. And then there was also someone from Israel, which I'll get his name in a moment. I'm not 100% sure. It's possible that Finbar, if they were thinking more on conditioning versus size, that he could have been in ninth, but I don't think so. He's just so muscular. I think Finbar was probably in sixth, but it was pretty amazing to be up there and know that I'm going against this really impressive lineup, and I'm not last. I'm in the mix, So
absolutely,
it was pretty cool. I did better than I thought I would do. And Aviv Mamo is the gentleman from Israel. He has a really, really aesthetic physique, just really, really classic lines. I think it was his pro debut. He got his pro card last year in 2022. Finbar has been competing as a pro for a bit, and I'm not sure of everyone else's background, but it was a very competitive pro class and a huge honor to be up there at all. And to place seventh, it gives me an idea of where I'm at. Like I am a mid to low level competitive pro, and now the goal is to try to move up to being, in the mix a little more clearly, if you will.
Yes, this is so cool because if we're talking about your history, like you started off, if I'm getting my facts right, with the PNBA, right? Is that correct? And
my very first season, I did an INBA show.
Oh, was it the INBA? So, okay, got it.
Which is the same. PNBA is just the pro.
Yeah, it's the amateur. Yeah.
But since 2009, I've been competing primarily with the INBF, WNBF. But in 2011, I did win my PNBA qualification. but I never competed as a PNBA pro. I just
Okay.
I got pro qualified, and then I took a long off season and then came back, and I've been primarily competing INBF for most of my career. If you look at like the breakdown of shows.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that Jeff competed as a lightweight. I think that's like the first time, right?
Yeah. So Jeff crushed himself with a water cut to make the lightweights. So he was probably weighing 167, 168. And then he did a gut cut. So it was low fiber, primarily juice for his carbs and like mostly liquid diet. And then he cut his water off on Friday and actually had to spit in a cup, and he was suffering. So he got to experience what a lot of us powerlifters experience making weight. But he came in just barely into the lightweights. He made 165.0 on the dot and snuck into the lightweights, which ended up being the most competitive division in terms of the challenge of placing it, because there were 16 lightweight competitors in the men's pro division. It'd be interesting to see where he would have been as a middle. Yeah, he would have probably been either third, fourth, or fifth.
Okay.
Maybe sixth. I mean, like, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I would have to see him compared, because it was a really, really competitive top five. So yeah, I think Jeff would have been somewhere in the mix there. Tough to say where exactly, but yeah, he beat 11 bodybuilders in the lightweights. That's another thing you have to think about, is, placing fifth out of 9 and fifth out of 16 are two different things,
For sure.
So
that was a strategy, I'm assuming, that he would come in as the heaviest lightweight. Was that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, once he started dipping under the 170s and he was getting into the best condition he's had in his life, and he's still looking as big and beastie as he is, we were like, you know what? If we sneak him into lightweights, he might do some damage. And he did. He did really good damage. And because he was competing on Sunday and the weigh-in was Friday, there's really no risk. The intelligent thing to do is to not mess with your carbohydrate load and just cut water, because you can fix dehydration within hours, a day at worst, but you can't fix flat sometimes for 48 hours. So yeah, he kept up with his game plan, and Berto, who helps a lot of top powerlifters as well as bodybuilders make weight, it's just like, yeah, we'll just do the water manipulation. Everything else stays the same, and you fill out and clean up on Saturday, and then we'll get you going on Sunday. He looks fantastic. So yeah, I think he actually just got his points back, and he was actually quite close to placing fourth. He was he probably got some third place votes on that, based upon just kind of the point system and how that all shook out. I don't think he has the score sheets exactly, but yeah, he was fifth place, closer to fourth than sixth by a good margin. And man, when I only saw the replay because I was pumping up while he was on stage, and they did have a monitor back there so you could see it. But in the symmetry round especially, he got moved to the center along with people. So I think in the symmetry round, he probably got some first, seconds, and thirds. And then in the muscularity round, he was probably like fourth, fifth, sixth, and it kind of shook out to an average of fifth. It's incredible how competitive it's become, man. There's some lightweights in there who you're just like, how are you a lightweight? Just one of them, and how was I did a water cut, but there's some thick dudes in the lightweights, man. It's really impressive.
Are they mostly under 5'9", would you say, though, in the lightweights?
Yeah. And so is Jeff. Yeah.
Jeff's 5'8", right?
Yeah, he's like 5'8". Yeah.
What I think is really crazy is how Brian DaCosta's 5'9". Like, that's like some Doug Miller type stuff right there. So that is truly extra.
5'9", competing in the high 190s. He's a big boy.
Right. And for perspective, for those listening, Eric, you're what, 6 foot?
I'm 6 foot, and I was on stage probably in the mid to high 170s. So yeah.
And Berto is 5'9". He competes at like 160, right?
Correct.
So more perspective there. So truly an outlier. That's how you would frame that, as far as like a Doug Miller, Brian DaCosta. I don't know.
Bada too. I think yeah, I mean, I think Bada is well over the heavyweight cutoff of 185. So yeah, these are big dudes, man. And you can see it when you look at their joints. It's just you're like, okay, I see what's happening here. You have a Neanderthal skeleton, so yeah.